decently framed. All right. So I've basically got a few little sections to this. The first section is kind of like where you're at now with more digital work and the sort of technical processes that you use. And then the second session will kind of go through your compositional practices and how they've changed over the course of your career. So the first one is almost like a short answer, and so we'll go through fairly quickly. Okay. If you would, for the camera, please state your name, your date of birth, and the location where we are right now.
Bruce Beasley, date of birth January 20th, 1958, and we're in my writing cottage in my studio in the back of my house in Bellingham, Washington.
What genres do you work in?
Poetry only.
Okay. And what kinds of devices do you own or have access to for writing?
Devices?
Yeah.
You mean like computers?
Sure. Yeah.
I have a laptop, Toshiba satellite laptop computer, and that's mainly it.
Is that it? So do you have do you work on a tablet or a phone or anything like that, or
no,
pretty primarily on that device? On
that and my office computer, which is a desktop.
Okay. And and then the operating system in which you work, is that a Windows?
Windows 7.
Okay.
Well, it's Windows 8 now.
Do you work on that office computer very often, or is that?
I do.
Okay.
When in the summer, like now, I work almost exclusively here on that computer.
Yeah.
When I'm at work, when I'm teaching, I'm often working a couple of hours a day, during the day, and I work mostly on the office computer when I do that.
Okay.
So I'm always sending files back and forth.
And how do you do that? Do you email them to yourself, or?
I have Carbonite on this computer.
Okay, so you have
I can call up these files there easily, but not vice versa. So.
Oh, they don't.
So things that I put on my office computer, I have to email to myself if I want to work on them here.
Oh, okay. So you don't have the folder on your office computer. You just have the kind of shared folder here.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you use computers exclusively, or do you also work with physically?
I use computers mostly. Okay. What I do a lot is I brought some examples of this.
Oh,
if
great.
you want to see them.
Yeah.
I write a lot when I'm walking.
Okay.
So I take long walks and I scribble in a notebook like this one. Just usually individual lines. Let's see if I can find some examples. And then often I will transcribe them onto note cards.
Okay.
This says your omissive offspring divulge what you've got in there, which is lines that I was working toward a poem called Offspring Insprung, which is a response to a sculptor named Bruce Beasley. He has the same name as me.
Oh, cool.
And we've been doing this kind of collaboration.
Oh, neat.
And I've been writing sort of my self-portrait through the lens of his sculptures. So he sent me a sculpture called Offspring, which is in the house if you want to see it. One of his sculptures. And I wrote a poem called Offspring Insprung, responding to his sculpture.
Yeah.
And so when I was writing that, I was taking long walks and just scribbling down random lines.
Yeah.
I can write individual lines by hand. When it comes to a whole poem, I do it almost exclusively on the computer.
Okay.
So this one says, even the evenings are odd, even the odds are even, offspring, autumnal equinox, off kilter. Which are not lines I ended up using, but often when I'm doing this kind of walking, I'll end up with a stack this big of note cards.
Yeah.
And then when I'm at the computer, I'll shift them around and type them up and rearrange them and shuffle them and move them into different places.
So you'll have them like kind of spread out in a grid on your desk, essentially, and then move them around. How does that help you? Does that help you? Are you picturing them on a page then? Is that or are you still kind of picturing them in the air or something like that?
Very much in the air, and I'll do a thing where I'll start writing by dealing out a card.
Okay.
So like I'll just randomly deal a card, coverts of the cube, and start writing from that on the computer.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of craps and gambling, and and I like to think of words as like rolls of the dice in a way.
Yeah.
So often when I'm beginning a poem, I'll start with just stray lines and images or phrases, quotations, like this, and then when I'm sitting down with the computer, I'll deal them out with something like, "You're in geometry."
Okay.
My teenage son was in geometry, taking geometry, but I was thinking about Bruce Beasley, the sculptor, and how geometrical his abstract sculptures are.
Oh, okay.
So I'll write like "You're in geometry," which is also not something I ended up using, though. I kind of like it now.
It is good. This is evocative.
So, yeah, I do a lot of handwriting work like that, especially when I'm walking.
Okay. And where do you walk?
The bay is about half a mile from here,
Okay.
Bellingham Bay, and the beach is about 1 mile exactly. So there's a beach called Little Squalicum Beach.
Uh-huh.
I usually walk from here down to there.
Okay.
And sit on the rocks by the water, by the beach.
And will you write while you're walking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I carry either note cards or a notebook with me and scribble things down as I'm walking.
And do you have specific notebooks that you use? I mean, that seems like a very unique notebook.
It's got a Byzantine cross on
Yeah.
it.
Is that? I mean, do you
kind of appropriate for me.
Yeah. No, it is very. Do you have Do you have many of those, or?
I do.
Okay.
And I write often when I'm writing. I'll just write titles. Often I start with just titles.
Okay.
So just yesterday I wrote "False Negatives," "Teen Lullaby with Abraham and Daedalus, Isaac and Icarus," "Be All and End All," "Study for Happiness."
Okay.
And often I'll start with a title like that and start mulling it and scribbling down lines for it in a journal like this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I get enough lines, either put them on note cards or just sit down with the computer in the notebook and start transcribing and moving around things that I've written in the notebook. I can't remember the last time, and I may never have done it, written an entire poem by hand.
Okay.
Without a typewriter or a computer. I just don't work that way.
Yeah, but you do write by hand a lot of the pieces of the poem.
Yeah, I generate, fragments of the poem. But
Okay.
the act of consolidating and moving them and making a poem out of them, for me, has always been done
on
a computer or a typewriter before that.
Yeah. So what do you do to kind of save, like when you're finished with the project or finished with these cards, do you save them somewhere?
Yeah, and I was trying to find the rest of these. I have them, but I couldn't put my finger on them, but they're somewhere.
Somewhere, like in a box or in a file cabinet, or?
Yeah.
And how many notebooks do you have at this point?
I have a lot.
Okay.
I have a box of them this big.
Okay.
In no particular order. The other thing I do, you might be interested in, is once a year or so I print out all the all the computer writing I've done.
Okay.
And I keep them in a bound journal that is by year.
Yeah.
So this one, for example, is 1999. And you'll see that a lot of times when I'm working on the computer, I write a kind of journal.
Yeah.
Just sort of what's going on and what I'm thinking about, and working with stray pieces of poems that I've written down by hand. And then, I don't know, somehow it's important to me to have it all printed out. Because when I'm writing and in between poems, I'll often skim through the printouts of previous years.
Yeah.
Looking for pieces of poems I started but never finished, or just stray lines that didn't go anywhere but now they do.
So does it serve almost like, so you don't search for, would you search for things on your computer too, or would you would rather come search your own archive, your own index of?
I don't like reading on a computer, I never have.
Okay.
I like to write on a computer but not read on it.
Yeah.
So, and what this also does, it gives me all the drafts of every poem I've ever written.
So and you do this once a year, you print out everything once a year?
Mm-hmm.
So do you, are there dates on the poems themselves? I mean, are
Yeah.
you okay? So you date and do you put a time, or do you just?
I do. Like this one says December 10th, 1999, Dickinson's birthday, and Dawn's a friend of mine. Come to think of it, Friday morning, 9:15. You know, and then I'll start talking about what's going on, and then start working on lines from a poem.
Yeah.
Thinking about etymologies. Latin penetralis, interpenetrary, to penetrate, from which comes penetralia. Penetrate is to enter or force a way into, to grasp the inner meaning of. You know, that sort of associative thinking.
Yeah.
But I do it in writing on the computer.
Okay.
Often. And when I'm not doing that, I'm walking and doing it in my mind and jotting down notes in a notebook.
Do you have like a schedule to which you try to keep, or is this just kind of a continual work?
Continual.
Okay.
When I'm in the summer or on sabbatical, I was on sabbatical most of year before last. Then I write every day.
Yeah.
You know, all day, as much as I can. And I'm either here at my desk, right there, or right here, or walking. And often I'll walk for 2 hours and come back and write for 2 hours or something like that.
Huh. So
when
it's
I'm
very.
teaching, I'm a really obsessive writer, so when I'm writing, I do it kind of nonstop.
Okay.
But I go long periods where I don't write.
And usually
on
those.
any kind of schedule.
And usually those correspond to your teaching?
Yeah.
Okay. And you teach, is Western on a quarter system?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you teach from September to mid-June
Late
every year?
September to early June, yeah.
Okay. So, all right, so let me kind of back up for a second. We've talked some about your practices now. I'd like to kind of like think about kind of different eras in your own career and your writing practices then too, and we can kind of relate them a little bit, hopefully. But before we got, could you say how long you've been writing? I mean, I have this is in scare quotes, but professionally.
How long have I been? My first book was published in 1988, so 98, 2008, 26 years.
25. And could you give kind of describe, kind of give a broad arc of your career, just to kind of ground the interview a little?
In terms of what I've written and published?
Yeah, where you've been, what the projects have been, etc.
Oh, okay. So I grew up in Macon, Georgia. I started writing poems when I was about 12.
Okay.
And really awful poems when I was 12. But I kept writing all through high school and went to Oberlin College, where I took a lot of creative writing classes, majored in English. And then I went to Columbia University MFA program after that, immediately after that. I graduated from there in 82. And did a series of editorial jobs during the first half of the 80s, writing for alumni magazines and things like that. And other magazines. I worked for a magazine called Good Life, which was a magazine designed to be marketed to the richest people in the country. It's like a 1%, top 1% magazine. And ironically, it went bankrupt shortly after I started working there. And then in 86, Wesleyan University Press accepted my first book, Spirituals, and that gave me the kind of jolt I needed, I think, because I just felt this increasingly grotesque disjunction between what I was doing for a living and what I cared about.
Yeah.
So I went back and got a PhD at the University of Virginia in American literature.
Yeah.
Did a dissertation on Emily Dickinson, and then while I was in the PhD program, I wrote most of my second book, The Creation, which won the Ohio State University Prize, and was published in '94.
Who chose that? Was that Charles Wright, or is that the next one? Is Charles Wright?
No, that was I think David Cetino was the judge of that. And I came here to Western in '92. Moved out to Bellingham in '92, fall of '92.
Yeah.
And in '96, Charles Wright picked the my third book, Summer Mystagogia, for the Colorado Press. And then Wesleyan published Signs and Abominations in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 years later, Lord Brain, a book about cosmology and the mind and the brain, and looking at metaphysics through the physicality of the brain and the structures of the cosmos, won the University of Georgia Press competition. Was published by them. And then The Corpse Flower, my new and selected poems, was published by the University of Washington Press in 2007, I guess. And the most recent was Theophobia, which Boa published in 2012.
Okay. And from 1992 to now, you've been a professor at Western Washington teaching. Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. Well, so I have this kind of broken apart into like composition, writing, pre-writing, generative structure, revision, and then organizational archival, which is more like putting books together, etc.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about it in different stages and see. And so, like, if those don't work for your writing process, let me know. And we can kind of talk about it differently, but we'll probably won't even. We'll probably just talk.
Okay.
But so, what was your? So when you first like say for right out of college up into your first book, what was your writing process like then? I mean, how were you writing then?
I was working, as I said, a series of editorial jobs, and I did a lot of writing at work, which was nice because I had jobs working for PR offices at colleges and universities.
Yeah.
But they were jobs where there was a huge amount of spare time, where there was really nothing to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't expected to do anything. There was nothing to be done. You know that old ad, the Maytag repair ad? There was an old famous ad campaign for Maytag washing machines, and the joke of it was that the washing machine never broke down, so they had Maytag repairs. And the Maytag repairs people were just really bored. They had nothing to do. So I had a sign on my door, on my desk that said Maytag repairs. And but I had a lot of spare time, so I would write a lot at work on my typewriter before computers. So I wrote a lot of my first book in those jobs.
And so when so if we can talk about like the kind of early, like pre-writing generative. So were you taking notes like you do now? I mean, how did you get to the poems? I guess at that point,
I was typing.
You were just typing.
Yeah. Okay. Typing. I remember. I probably have one of those notebooks here if you want to look at it. Yeah, here's one. And I was printing it out. This is a little bit later. This is '92, but I was printing it out on these long rolls of printer paper. You know, those old style printer rolls that
with the like serrated edges.
Yeah. So just doing essentially what I do now, large chunks of prose that would lead to ideas and sort of mull through ideas.
Yeah.
But I was typing it on a selective typewriter.
Okay. And then printing it out that way. So you started, when you were starting, you were writing on a typewriter, and had a similar mode of kind of generative. Did you do walks or anything like that in the early?
No, it had to be at my desk, so I couldn't.
Okay, you had to be at your desk, and so you were. Would you write lines and then rearrange them at that point, or were you kind of composing more closely full poems?
Exactly the same way I do it now.
Okay. Change.
Change it all. No, I'd write straight lines and then start pulling them together and rearranging, and the difference was it was much more cumbersome to retype it all than it is now.
Yeah.
But essentially the same process.
Okay. And then as you progressed in your career, I mean, when did you move to a computer?
I think my first computer was probably a computer in graduate school. I think probably at the end of, because I wrote my dissertation on a typewriter. No, I didn't. I had a computer when I was writing my dissertation in Virginia in the early 90s.
Early 90s.
90, 91.
And so when you were getting your PhD, what was your writing style like? I mean, were you writing at home mostly?
Yeah, and I was doing long walks then too.
Okay. Through Charlottesville somewhere? And then was that when you started writing down on the note cards?
No, that's a pretty recent thing.
That's a more recent thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've kind of, so that sort of early, that sort of note-taking, walking established pretty early. What, did anything change, like, as you moved to Bellingham, or was the process fairly similar for pre-writing, etc.?
It's been pretty constant, yeah.
Been pretty constant. Has it changed by location at all? I mean, I guess one big event probably in your writing life is this thing. What was it like? I mean, was there a change when this came into your life? When was this built? This cottage?
I think about 7 years ago.
Did your writing practice change very much for it, or was it just made much more easeful?
Made easier. This is my flipper. This thing is crucial to my writing.
Okay.
This is the window crank for a old-fashioned window that I had growing up in Macon, Georgia.
Uh-huh.
And as a child, I started a process of flipping this thing, or doing like this. And I call it my flipper. It's crucial to my writing, and I've had it ever since I was a little kid.
Okay.
But as a kid, I would throw it when I was thinking. And even as a teenager, I would write mostly by flipping this thing. And there's something about the action, the repetitive action of throwing and catching that's always been really important to generating ideas.
Yeah.
It's similar to the kind of rhythm I have when I'm walking, I think.
Uh-huh.
That kind of rhythmic catch and release. So often when I'm writing, all through my life, I've kept this thing with me and I flip it while I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I can't think unless I'm doing that. It's a kind of kinetic thing, I think.
Yeah.
And when I'm walking, often I have a stick or a stick that I'm flipping or throwing around.
Something with the hands almost always too.
Yeah. And, so I lost this thing for a couple of years. Somehow it got lost, and it drove me crazy. And I found it. I was like, my flipper is back.
That's funny. Within the writing process, do you have certain times when you pick it up? I mean, are you more likely to use it when you're generating work or when you're revising, or does it?
All times.
All times.
Especially when I'm revising. And when I'm revising, I say the poems aloud over and over.
Okay.
Always. And often when I'm walking, I can always tell a poem is almost finished because I've come to the point where I've memorized it without trying to.
Yeah.
Just from saying it aloud so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And often when I'm walking, I get to a point where I've got a draft in my mind and I'm mumbling it to myself aloud while I'm walking.
Yeah.
To hear the rhythm of it and the sound of it and the words of it. But when I'm revising or when I'm generating new ideas, I often use this thing.
Yeah. And
I remember my roommate in college told me when Suzanne and I were first dating, I would leave her house and come back to my own room in a house where I was renting a room, and I would lie in bed and flip this thing. And he came in and said, you tell Suzanne you're writing, but really you're just flipping your flipper. I said, but flipping my flipper is how I write. That's what I'm doing. I'm writing.
Oh, that's fascinating. I guess I'm sort of trying to get. I mean, like, so you'll use your flipper in somewhat pensive moments when you're kind of considering what you've written or what you're about to write.
Yeah.
But also maybe, I mean, do you when you're do you do it at your desk ever?
It's kind of hard to do it in the desk, so
yeah.
when I'm sitting or lying down in bed.
So sort of, okay.
So in here, I'll pull the Murphy bed down sometimes and look out the skylight and, and do this and think and jot down lines.
Yeah. So you were saying, earlier, like, so once you have these lines jotted down, you have the notebooks kind of composed, and you'll also have big chunks of prose in the computer that you've written too. I mean, so how does this jumble become a poem exactly? I mean, like, where do you get to the point where you start to rehearse it in your head and to start to revise it?
Oh, okay. So the prose that I write is, I'll find a more recent one, is designed to get me, it's just sort of a thinking aloud.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage my students to try this too. It works really well. For me anyway, that, let's try this one. So I'll start with just a kind of diary, not like a diary, but just sort of this is what's happening right now. And then go from that to general ideas and images, fragments. Sometimes I'll make lists of words that'll take up a page or two.
Okay.
Sometimes this is my unabridged dictionary that I use.
So you roll the dice with?
Obsessively. Yeah. And sometimes I'll roll dice to pick a page in the dictionary and open to that page and just read that page until something in the words or the etymologies or the definitions triggers something.
And what's the edition? What dictionary is that?
This is a
oh yeah, that's fine.
Webster's unabridged New Universal. Yeah.
All right.
So I'll turn to a particular page: cleanly, clean sweep, clean shaven, cleanser, clean room, cleaning woman, clean energy, clean cut, clean bill of health. Read around it until something starts triggering something that's going on emotionally or intellectually right at that moment in my life.
Yeah.
So thinking about cleanness, and I might just start typing and thinking about associating with cleanness and dirt and pollution and what it means for something to be clean cut. And so I'll start writing some lines.
Yeah.
And then often what I'll do is, once I've got some lines or some ideas going, I'll go for a walk and I'll just fill up a whole page with words that sound good with the word clean.
Okay. How do you determine what sounds good with the word clean?
Just associatively, clean machine, for example, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
And I would write maybe on a note card or a notebook, clean machine, even though that doesn't mean anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
What's a clean machine? And walking, I'll start thinking about a clean machine. And, just as an example.
Yeah.
So you asked, how do you get from that prose to lines? I'll just read you an example. Reading Salon, it is time it were time, which is a line up. One of my favorite lines of Salon.
Mm-hmm.
Amen to that. I want to write a damaged self-portrait. That's a poem that ended up being in Signs and Abominations.
Yeah.
The principle being to write about myself as I am now through suggestive images rather than through narrative or logical progression. So a lot of times I'll start with that kind of abstract, this is what I want to do, how am I going to do it. A series of images for myself, for selfhood in general, disconnected images, and then I'll start writing lines. Rent, twin. And there it's just that rent and twin sound good together. Rent, twin, gash in the oak trunk, mud suck on boots. What comes back comes halved, crucifix, the awkward joining together of two broken sticks. Just sort of free associating images and lines and ideas and words that sort of draw each other for me. And after a while, I'll take some of those lines and start walking and thinking about it. And what's mud suck on boots? What am I talking about?
Yeah.
And start building on that.
How do you determine what comes first, what comes later? How do you, I guess, build the progression of a poem?
At first, I don't worry about that at all.
Okay.
I just let lines accumulate.
Yeah.
Images accumulate, phrases, until I have a whole series of pages of drafts.
Yeah.
And then I'll start worrying about it. I try not to make myself... I know poets who write from the first line on.
Yeah.
Who begin with the first line and then write the second line. Linda Beards once told me she writes that way, which astonished me because it's so utterly unlike anything I do.
Yeah.
But I really try, especially when I'm writing long poems, which a lot of my poems are, not to impose any order on it in the beginning.
Yeah.
Until I've got pages and pages of lines. And then I'll print them out. See if I can find an example of. Okay, so here I'll have like just pages of lines, often separated by just asterisks or marks, like with no attempt at coherence.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'll start moving them around. Like, what if I start here, and what if I put this here?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll have them all written out on note cards and rearrange the note cards, because I'll have one section, and I'll go through the note cards and say, what would be interesting after this? And I'll move that card to the second position, and then type it all up together in that order.
Yeah.
And read it aloud until it starts to sound right.
And when you type it up on the computer like that, what do you... I guess I'm wondering where this all resides on your computer. Like, where do you have like a folder for notes and lines, and then a folder for like poems that are starting to come to fruition?
Would you like to see an example?
Sure. Okay. Sure.
What I do typically is within that file where I have all the sort of ruminations and free associations and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. What do you call that file?
I usually, well, I'll show you.
Okay.
Sometimes I just call it by the name of the month to make it easy. Like in 2014.
Yeah.
But often I'll give it a title that's thematic instead. Like I might call the thing I was just working on, I might call Damaged Self.
Yeah.
Something like that. I like doing that, except that it's hard then to go back and figure out when that was written. You know?
Right. Right.
So I've started just calling them June 2014. So when I go back to print them all out, then
you know what order to put them in.
I know where what's what. And I've started organizing them by year on my computer. So under my documents, I have a file called Poems. And within it, I'll have, I don't know if you can see this, 2011, 2012, 2013, drafts of my book, manuscript, all parts, soul parts returned, various other things. And within 2013, I have early summer 2013, Ecclesiastes, January 2013, late summer 2013, things like that.
And so those are the files, those are the folders that will hold the individual poems?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I have drafts of a poem I was working on, called Speech for a Speed Date. And this is a poem I wrote partly by taking the first poem I ever wrote when I was 12 years old and running it through Google Translate, through just about every language that they offer, until it came back completely deformed and defaced.
Yeah.
And still, it was a really corny poem called "Light a Single Candle," and it became kind of a surrealistic speech for a speed date.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the hiss of candle wax and cigarette ash? Do your hobbies include a love of what cannot die? Some of which came out of those translations. Then I'll have this kind of, list of what's going on. And then drafts of a poem called Reading Jesus Again with a New Prescription. And you'll see I have a whole bunch of lines that I'm working on, and what I often do is just copy those and then write some prose about them, sort of identifying what I like about it, what's bugging me about it, what I don't like about it, and then paste it back again, move things around. And often I'll put boldface, when this is a revision process, when I get to a place that I don't like or it feels clunky, I'll boldface it.
Yeah.
So that I come back to it and just like, what am I going to do to fix that?
Okay. And
then the next draft I'll cut it or change it, and here's a whole section that's all in boldface.
Yeah.
Which I think I ended up cutting out. And this is a fairly long poem, so there's a lot of drafts of it. And then I'll copy it over and over until I get it the way I want it.
So all drafts are in one file.
Yeah.
And you just keep copying and replacing and bolding parts that you have problems with, and then it starts, and then as it gets towards the end of the file, it's getting towards its final form.
So like here, I'll have the draft of that speech for a speed date, and then I'll say, the cling of cigarette ash to candle wax feels a little bland, intensify it. I'll sort of give myself instructions like that.
Oh, okay.
Tallow might be a better word than candle wax. Do you enjoy the cling of cigarette ash to tallow? And various versions of it. And you'll see I've got like draft.
Yeah.
Probably 10 or more drafts of it in here.
So I'm interested in the Google Translate stuff. Do you do that? Have you done that before, or is this the first time?
This is the first time I did that.
Okay.
Well, no, actually I did that partly with one of the poems in Theophobia. It's a poem about the Gospels and a meditation on the Gospels. And I'm forgetting the title of it right now.
I have it. If you...
I've got it right here. Yes, the poem called "The Kingdom of God is Not Ushered In with Pomp and Exclamations."
Okay.
And what I did with that is I took some of the passages of the Gospels and ran it through Google Translate to see what would happen to it. So that it would be partly recognizable from the Gospels, but partly different, estranged.
Yeah.
I didn't use exactly the phrasings that came out of Google Translate, but allowed it to shake up the familiar biblical canonical sayings in such a way that it became stranger.
Yeah.
And gave me ideas for rephrasing things.
Had you ever, before that, had you ever done any similar practices?
Not that I can think of.
Had there been any other computer kind of enhanced ways of composing poems?
Not computer enhanced.
Okay.
A lot of aleatory practices like the dice I mentioned in the sequence in the Corpse Flower called the crap symbol.
Right.
Where I rolled dice every day for a period of several months and went to a page in the dictionary and worked that way.
Yeah. And like when you in the Corpse Flower they have the dice as the, and so how did you do that, or did you work with the publisher to do that, to have the dice appear above the title?
I had it in my manuscript.
You did have it in your manuscript?
And somebody read the manuscript, said no publisher's ever going to do this. They're not going to reproduce dice on everything. I said yes, they are. They have to. It's part of the poem.
Yeah.
And University of Washington Press, they were great about it. They agreed to do that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And you also, I think it's in, is it in that poem, or it's in another poem in Corpse Flower, where you have like the bolded but like shadowed.
In the rock box.
Yeah. And is that something? I mean, where did that come from? I guess.
That came from a good friend of mine who's a geologist, and he collects animal bones.
Okay.
As part of his research, he's very interested in the physiology of animal skeletons. But he had on his property out in the country this thing he called the rock box, where he would take animal carcasses and allow them to rot over a winter, and then have a day in the fall where he would harvest. We call it harvesting the rock box. And I went with him, and it actually happened to be the day that the war in Afghanistan started.
Oh, okay.
And so I spent the whole morning helping him harvest this rock box, which is a matter of taking these skeletons out of this big decomposing pit and cleaning them with bleach and other stuff. And it was, I don't remember, cow skulls, or I'm not sure what it was. So I spent the whole morning with him doing that, and then as I was driving home, and just still stinking of, decomposition.
Did you volunteer for this job, or?
He called me up and said, I'm harvesting the rock box, you want to come? And I went, yeah, hell yeah.
All right.
So our friendship began, really, because we hardly knew each other. But all the way home from the county, I was listening to the radio, and the bombing had started, shock and awe had started in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about things that decompose, and words and phrases that decompose into other words and phrases.
And how were you able to do that on your computer? Were you just sort of experimenting with the fonts and? Yeah,
I think what I did is used a larger outline font.
Okay.
So that the letters would look hollowed out.
Yeah. And had you, I mean, before the computer, did you ever have inclinations to use sort of fonts like that, or do any sort of things?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in some of the visual poetics of poets like Ronald Johnson.
Yeah.
His early work,
right,
which is all typewriter based, but he does some amazing things with the shape of the words and the appearance of the words using the typewriter.
Yeah. And you, I mean, a lot of your poems, I mean, especially, I guess Signs of Abomination, where you use, I mean, a lot of punctuation to kind of indicate either definitions coming or stuff like that. I mean, some of that is rote, but some of it seems, that you made up yourself. I mean,
yeah.
Where is that something that you kind of like, how did that come about, I guess is the question.
I'm using a lot of punctuation in this new manuscript.
Oh.
Let me show you a draft of it. Punctuation is a kind of separation of sections, but also is a kind of an element of meaning in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
So this poem has a single asterisk for the first section, 2 for the second, 3 for the third, and so forth. Others have crosses, dividing sections, which I mean to suggest the Christian cross, of course, but also a sign of addition.
Yeah, okay.
Each section being an addition to the previous one. Let's see what else. One of my readers for this manuscript said they found that distracting, and others said they found it exciting. I'm hoping for the exciting. Here I have a kind of version. This is one of the Bruce Beasley poems.
Okay.
It's kind of a version of the does not equal sign.
Yeah.
Because I'm writing about his geometrical shapes. I'm working with the geometrical shapes of punctuation and typography. And that, I suppose, well, you couldn't do that on a typewriter. That's a imported symbol from a computer-mediated text. So in that way, I think. Here I'm talking about the Korean letter, which has no sound. You have to put it. I'm learning Korean with my son, who's Korean. It's a letter you have to put in front of a vowel sound because vowels can't come first in a word in Korean.
Okay.
So if you begin with a vowel, like an ah, you have to put this null consonant in front of it. But it also resembles an egg or a zero.
Yeah.
So I'm working visually with the sound of that. There's a consonant shaped like an egg balanced on its end that stands for nothing, makes no sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm connecting that to certain hollow geometrical structures in Bruce Beasley's sculptures.
Okay.
So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think
this is a poem that's based on Empedocles, the ancient philosopher, who believed that in primordial times there were body parts scattered all over the world, disconnected. Hearts and lungs and livers, and that they gradually morphed together and created monstrous, grotesque amalgamation of body parts.
Okay.
Until eventually they came to a point where the body parts worked together and formed human beings and animals. So here I have stray syllables scattered all over the page that keep coming together and trying to form words.
Yeah.
Like formal, chasmal, malform, fictile, fickle, cavern, us, Venus, nihilo. Stray syllables sort of groping together to form words. And by the end of the poem, it goes on. It's a lot with shape, the omega, and this is also meant to indicate the womb.
Yeah.
So a lot with visual shape. By the time the poem gets to the end, it makes perfect sense. The words have come together into the syllables have come together into words, and the words have come together into sentences, and the sentences into coherent units of meaning.
Sure. Do you write out the sentences in a more like prose style, or I mean, like to make sure that they're working like that? I mean, like I guess how do you get from the notes, the line notes, or the notes on your computer to something that's shaped? I guess is a newer thing.
You'd be terrified to see all the drafts of that poem.
Okay.
Because I have several hundred syllables, and in the drafts, the rule of the poem is that once a syllable is introduced, it has to be repeated.
Okay.
Elsewhere in the poem, it has to keep repeating. and recombining with other syllables. So I had pages and pages of syllables in alphabetical order. And when they repeat, I would scratch them out. So I'd have AC, and it would form accident, and then it would come back as accumulate. And, but any syllable that was introduced that wasn't didn't echo somewhere else in the poem, I would have to keep revising until it came back.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was just a list of syllables, not even words, just syllables.
I guess I'm interested in I mean, like, your early work is less disjunctively broken, right? I mean, so when did that come in, and why did that come in?
Started in late 90s, I guess. Signs and Abominations was a big break, I think, in poetics for me.
Yeah.
I became much more interested in fragmentation and disruption, and imitating disruptive states of mind and disruptive states of knowledge with disruptions in the poems themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas before that, I'd been very interested in a kind of well-made poem that was coherent and imagistic and lyrical.
Yeah.
I got bored with that mode and wanted to allow the poems to become stranger and more broken and more intuitive and less logical, less linear.
Yeah. And so, and it seems like you've kind of got you've went down that path, and then now you've gone down that path further into oddly a more kind of ordered shape, a visual shape.
Yeah.
But how does sound work in that sense? Then when you say when you're revising, you're reading them out loud. Mm-hmm. How do you read out loud like a poem shaped like an omega?
I have a very particular way of reading.
Okay.
Where I try to space out the sounds of the letters that are on either side of the omega, mm-hmm. so that central absence is there.
Okay.
And it's formed by silence rather than a visual shape on the page.
And is that? I mean, I guess I'm thinking to some of your Cage references right away when you say that. And so, he seems like, is he a figure that came in later to kind of push forward some of those poetics as well, or? Yeah,
Cage did. A lot of his ideas were important, especially when I was doing the aleatory sequence with the dice and things like that. Mm-hmm. Reading Paul Celan was hugely important. I think I first read Celan in the 90s. He's become a giantly important figure for me.
Okay.
And largely in that his work speaks to me so intensely without me knowing what it's saying on any rational level.
So does that mean you're reading it into German? Or?
No, okay. I mean, even in translation.
Okay.
It's magnificent to me, but I would be very hard put to say what it means.
Okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood, I think.
Yeah, here's a version I've been reading that streak in the eyes so that a sign be preserved, dragged through darkness, or stored to life by sand or ice. That's magnificently suggestive to me, but I would not be able to paraphrase it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've been working toward a kind of poetics that's much less paraphrasable.
Have you? I mean, like, so in the notes and whatnot, do you think you could trace like a poetics, like the progression of your poetics, like in these notes and in these prose things that you write while you're writing the poems, and so you start to kind of reason with yourself or something like that?
I talk to myself, which is a way of thinking, but it's a different way of thinking than at least I normally think.
Right.
You don't talk to yourself, at least I don't talk to myself most of the time when I'm thinking. But when I'm writing sort of meditations on the computer, I'm literally talking to myself.
Okay.
I'm saying, I want to do this. Why do I want to do this? And I'm asking myself questions.
Okay. So you're sort of interrogating your own practice while you practice.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you've been doing that the whole time, pretty much? I mean, like, were you taught how to do, were you taught this? I mean, I guess it's an interesting practice, and I'm wondering where it comes from.
Was I taught it? No. I did. I remember doing it in college a lot. I thought of it then as automatic writing.
Yeah.
And I guess I was introduced to the idea of automatic writing, where you just write whatever comes into your mind
Mm-hmm.
as a generative practice.
Yeah.
For me, automatic writing sort of became a talking my way through a poem, or into a poem, and it's a practice I've kept. I don't think of it as automatic writing anymore. I think of it as just writing. It's just the way I write.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one question that I kind of have from a little earlier is when you're doing this automatic or this writing in prose, and then you have collections of notebooks that were written on a typewriter, so they weren't saved in files like they are now,
Right.
and so you couldn't go back at the end of the year and print them out. So how would you print those out?
Daily.
Daily, okay, and you collect them daily too. So you've been using.
Well, I mean, I was literally typing, so on a typewriter I would just save the pages and bind them into a notebook.
And then puts at the end. Would you do the same thing, kind of a ritualistic year-end thing, where you gather them all together, or were they just coming together?
I would just keep them in a box, I think, until the end of the year, and bind them up into a notebook.
Yeah. And is this something you do like every New Year's Day, or
no,
just
not any particular time.
Just at the end of the year? Sometimes you like,
Usually around the beginning of summer, because I'm sort of looking back on what I've written the year before.
Oh, okay.
And and have time to, focus on things like that.
So like now would be a time.
Now I'll probably do the last 6 months or the last year, sometime soon this summer.
Okay. And then, so I guess we've talked a lot about the kind of composition. We've talked some about the revision. Has the revision changed much over your careers? I mean, like, when you introduced this more disjunctive line break, essentially, and got more fragmentary, did the revising process change?
It did, in that it used to be much more aimed at clarity. Clarity would be a big thing I would revise toward, in terms of driving out of the poem anything that didn't obviously belong to it thematically or imagistically.
Yeah.
And that's no longer really a concern, because there are all kinds of things happening in my poems now that don't obviously belong together.
Yeah.
So it's much more intuitive than that, I guess. But I have a general sense of what I want a poem to be doing, and what is in it and what isn't in it, and why. But it's not, clarity is not the thing that determines that anymore.
Right, right. Would you say that are you driven by a certain kind of, are they driven by sound, by meaning? I mean, what's the sort of driving force of the revision, and has that changed? I mean, you said you've kind of said this, you were moving more towards clarity, and now, but I mean, is there a sense that the sound is more prominent now, or that you...
The sound is definitely more prominent now, but also I'm paying much more attention to the shape of words on the page.
Yeah. The
visual appearance of the words. And to the, let me show you an example from this.
And to be clear, you do work in Microsoft Word, yes, predominantly? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so this is a poem that was published in the Gettysburg Review that's in the new manuscript. And it's a poem about jellyfish, moon jellies in particular. Mm-hmm. It's called Such and Such and Such and Such. Where I'm playing with the expression such and such, but also with the Buddhist concept of suchness, which is a term that means emptiness in Buddhism, but it also means particularity, radical particularity. The suchness of a thing is its particularity, but it's also the awareness that it's empty.
Yeah.
That it has no ultimate reality and that it's changeable. So I started this poem out eventually by moving the lines around. I can't stop watching the YouTube of these moon jellies yanking their translucence inside out over and over and getting nowhere. So this is a poem that is in 4 sections because I'm playing with quaternity, fourness. Mm-hmm. And so I have many drafts here. And part of the revision process was condensation. I felt it was too long, so there, I wrote there. That's not bad. Condensed a bit down to 32 lines rather than 40. So tightening it up is part of what I was doing.
And making a note as to what that revision did
Yeah.
in the revision. Is that something you do?
Always.
Always?
Yeah. And then I went through each section, cutting things out, adding things. Some of the lineation feels clunky. I need to read through and adjust. Pretty happy with that now. You know. So that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Revising more for condensation and surprise, I guess, and disruption and surprise rather than clarity and consistency.
Yeah. But still, I mean, but like you said, you're working with the 4 parts theme, so you do impose a certain order on it as well, right? I mean, there's always, and that seems something you do quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of different things you do, and then also quotations, etc. So, so now we kind of, we've gone through revision, we've gone through composition a little bit, and, well, not a little bit, a lot, but. So how do these become a book, then, I guess, is the question there.
I've been working on exactly that. This book is called All Soul Parts Returned. I'm still playing with the title here. I have All Soul Parts.
Uh-huh.
And it started, the concept of the book started with a friend who gave me a pamphlet. I was going through some difficult time emotionally about something. I don't remember what it was. But he had somebody hand him a pamphlet that a New Age shaman gave him.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pamphlet that said, come to this workshop for like $375. You can consult with a shaman who will travel into non-ordinary reality and find your missing soul parts and bring them back to you. And it said the cause of all emotional turmoil, upset, unhappiness was that parts of your soul had broken off and gone away.
Yeah.
And they had to be returned. They could only be returned by a professional. And the professional travels into a mystical state and finds your soul parts. And the pamphlet had this statement on it: all soul parts returned for a fee. And I just found that hilarious.
Yeah.
I said, that's the problem. My soul parts are gone.
Yeah.
But as I started thinking about these poems in conjunction with each other, I realized it made a really, I think, rich metaphor for loss, for grief, for emotional pain.
Yeah.
And that it pulled together a lot of the things I was dealing with in this manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And also tonally, this manuscript is much lighter in tone, a lot more humor in it than in my other books.
Okay.
The sort of irony of that commercial language to describe something spiritual.
Yeah.
All soul parts returned, like it was saying, kills germs dead or something.
Yeah.
It became the sort of overarching metaphor. So the revision process has been one of moving things around and structuring poems in relation to each other. And so I've got 3 big parts of it. One part is a long poem called The Mass of the Ordinary, which is a kind of contemporary mass with all the traditional sections of the Catholic Mass.
Yeah.
The Kyrie and the Gloria and Agnus Dei and all those parts of the Mass. And I originally had that as one big chunk. It's about 10 poems, fairly long poems. I had that all together in the beginning. And then I have a long series called Praise Song for Schopenhauer, about philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, and it's a kind of argument with Schopenhauer's pessimism.
Okay.
So I have the Mass that's pulling toward orthodoxy and traditional Catholic faith. I'm a converted Catholic. And the Schopenhauer poems that are pulling toward pessimism and nihilism and philosophical despair.
Mm-hmm.
And originally I had started with the Mass and ended with the Schopenhauer poem. That wasn't working because it ended up with the book being very despairing.
Yeah.
In a way I didn't want it to be. So what I'm doing now is I've broken the Mass poems and the Schopenhauer poems up, and they're interspersed all the way through the manuscript as a kind of 2 tugging, contrasting motifs that are arguing with each other all the way through.
So does the composition of a book like this feel a lot like the composition of an individual poem? I mean, is it like fractal-like in that sense?
It does, exactly like that.
Yeah, and has that been the case your entire career, or has that been something you... Okay.
It has. It feels exactly like a large poem in that now the individual poems are the stanzas. Due to the book, what the stanzas do to a poem.
Yeah.
Which means you can move them around and the poem changes meaning drastically according to where you start and where you end.
Do you change the poems too once they're in? I mean, once they're in this order, and you're still working on the poems. You're working on the book at the same time. I'm
revising the poems to help them illustrate the structure of the book.
Okay.
So I have a poem that I wrote when I was on sabbatical. I wrote a poem. You have to write a report to the provost where you tell them what you did on your sabbatical. And I got the idea that I would write that as a poem. Mm-hmm. So the poem is called Report to the Provost on the Progress of My Leave. And
I like that.
So I decided at one point, this is a poem about losing your soul parts and losing parts of yourself.
Yeah.
So I thought, what if I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, well, wait, what if I put the leave poem first? Because then it begins with the leaving.
Yeah.
And the first line of that, when I revised it, I realized I could move this to the beginning of the poem, and thus the beginning of the book was I've gone missing, the way someone else might go drinking or caroling. And so now the book is called All Soul Parts Returned, and it starts with losing myself.
Yeah.
You know, losing control of myself, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually.
Yeah.
And so it starts with a sort of losing connection with yourself, and then ends now with a coming back of the self. So the way I've got it ending now, it's, and this is still in process, but I think it's going to go this way. It's ending now with a section that says, I'm here with most of my soul parts. None of us just wishing we were here. Mm-hmm. So it goes from losing soul parts to regaining them. Because I wanted the title All Soul Parts Returned to be ironic, but also to be what happens in the process of the book.
Yeah.
So the book being the act of personal shamanism that brings back the missing parts of yourself and reintegrates the self.
So you become a professional in some way.
Yeah. I return my own soul parts.
Yeah. That's yeah.
But I've showed the manuscript to several friends and other poets, and I haven't felt like the overall metaphor I'm working toward is coming through clearly enough.
Yeah.
And I think it's partly because this idea of soul part retrieval is still alien to people who aren't in that subculture. So what I'm planning to do now, and I'm planning to start on it next week even, is a brief lyrical introduction that describes what soul retrieval is.
Okay.
And describes the shamanist's belief that every time you endure any kind of trauma, a part of your soul leaves you. And that your soul diminished because you've lost parts of your soul that are no longer accessible.
Yeah.
And that if they can be restored, then you'll be restored to wholeness. But one of the epigraphs I have here, and I really like this as an epigraph, it's from a New Age website, and it's frequently asked questions. And one of the questions is, my soul parts don't like me. And this is from somebody who got their soul parts back, but now find that their soul parts are unhappy to be there.
Yeah.
And the answer is, of course they don't like you. But it's good that you know how they feel. First you betrayed them by sending them away. Then you forgot them and left them there. And now that they are back, they discover that you are boring.
That's good.
So what I'm trying to get at there is that even if you get your soul parts back, they may not be happy to be there. Because the soul is not a unity, but a series of bickering parts.
Yeah. I think it's in Theophobia where you mentioned that, was there a website of seldomly asked questions?
I made that up, yeah.
Okay. I thought that was like the funniest thing I've read in quite a while. I was like, because I'm building a website now for the library. I was like, that would be really good. Like, I've got an FAQ. I'd like seldomly asked questions.
Seldom asked questions.
That'd be a really funny page. But yeah, no, that's it. Well, but I mean, and this too. I mean, so you seem to use the internet as content and as fodder for poems starting obviously in the kind of 2000s. So where does the internet lie in kind of your practice? I guess, I mean, I've seen printouts in here, and I see, and I mean, you definitely use a lot of etymology and stuff. Do you go to the internet for that? Do you?
I do. I go to the Oxford English OED online.
Yeah.
Frequently, and I have all poems in here that came out of OED definitions that are read on the internet.
Yeah.
There's a poem I have in here that was in the Kenyon Review called "Me Meaneth," and that came out of, I was teaching a class in dreams and poetry, and we were talking about what dreams mean and what poems mean. And then I got the idea in class, well, let's call up the OED online and look at what the word mean means. So we did that, and so I had it up on screen in the classroom, and one of the definitions of mean was an archaic definition that it used to mean to lament or to mourn. So we were talking about even the word mean has multiple meanings that it didn't mean to me, and how dreams are multiple, but poems are multiple, but the word even words, individual words, are so multiple that you can't delimit their flux.
Yeah.
And so I kept thinking about that, and I ended up writing a poem called "Me Meaneth," which is about the idea that meaning has lamentation or mourning locked into it, because meaning can't be controlled, and it can't be packaged, it can't be narrowed down. And there's something wonderful about that, but there's something mournful about that too.
Yeah. Before the internet became something that you were able to use more easily, what would you turn to kind of do this sort of work? I mean, were you doing this sort of work? Were you?
I was much more in a library than I am now.
Okay, so you kind of the internet meant the leaving the library in some ways.
Yeah, I still spend a lot of time in libraries, but yeah, it allows me to do things right here that I used to have to go to a library for.
Yeah, and so how much does research inform the poems? I mean, obviously a huge amount. And how does that work in relationship?
So I'm usually researching while I'm writing those paragraphs of sort of thinking and then straight lines and things. I'm often wondering things like, one of my poems in this manuscript has the line, I keep wondering if mass and massacre have some common root. And then I'll go to the internet and research mass and massacre and copy from the OED the definitions and the etymologies and paste them into the document I'm working on.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Or I'll start thinking about soul retrieval, and I'll go to a whole bunch of soul retrieval websites and see what kind of promises they're making. I find it hilarious that a lot of them don't even do it in person. You send them $350 through PayPal, and they claim that they, from their own home in Virginia or wherever it is, a journey into non-ordinary reality and retrieve your soul parts. And one of the questions is, don't you need to be with me in order to bring back my soul parts? Oh no, your soul parts can be brought back to you spiritually. And
oh man,
is there a difference between soul retrievals that you do in person and ones that you do from a distance? Oh no, there's no difference at all. People are actually paying people hundreds of dollars to claim they're returning their soul parts when they never even met them.
Yeah.
At least if you do it in person, they supposedly blow it into your mouth.
Oh.
They do. They catch the soul parts and they come and they blow the soul parts into your lungs.
Did you, as research, get your soul parts returned to you? I guess is my.
I've thought about it, but no, I haven't wanted to spend that much money.
Yeah. Maybe you can get a grant or something.
There is somebody who lives here and teaches at Western who is an academic expert on soul retrieval.
Really?
And I'm thinking of going to talk to her.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I could keep a straight face. But she takes it very serious.
She doesn't offer the internet, the virtual soul retrieval thing.
She doesn't do them herself, I don't think.
Okay.
She does train people in how to do it.
Oh wow. So we've talked about books. Talked about kind of gotten there. I guess one thing that you've mentioned in passing a couple of times are other people in their relationship to your process. So so where do other people fit in? I mean, are they? I know your wife's a poet and a writer, and you have, I'm sure, many poet friends. I mean, are they part of the revision process? Or are they more at the kind of general book level process? Where do they come in? Are you corresponding with them?
And I read all of each other's work. Excuse me. And we tend to read each other's work when we reach the point we call exhausting our resources, which means that you've revised enough that there's nothing in the draft that makes you, that you know you could improve.
Yeah.
You've reached a point where you've done everything you can to it, and it's time to get somebody else's feedback. So Suzanne will read my work, and she's a really great reader and give me really honest feedback on what's working well and what needs work. And then I have, I don't know, 4 or 5 friends that I tend to share my work with. Usually after Suzanne's read it and I've revised it further, I'll send to them. And with the book manuscript too, this is a stack of different versions of it that 3 different friends have read.
Okay. And
Suzanne has read. So one of the things I'm doing this week is going through the manuscript with all 3 or 4 versions with marginal comments from 3 different friends and from Suzanne. Going to compare it page by page and see where there are commonalities, so they all agree that something needs more work.
Yeah.
Where there are contradictions, and think through the contradictions.
Yeah. And are these people that you work with, are they all poets themselves mostly?
Yeah.
Or? Okay. And are they the same people have been there the whole time, or has that changed throughout the course?
Mostly, some of them, 2 or 3 of them are people I went to graduate school with at Virginia.
Oh, wow.
And we had a writing group where we all met once a week while we were in grad school. And we've sort of continued over the years through internet.
Yeah.
And one is a new friend, poet I met, who's just read my manuscript for me, and I read his manuscript for him, and that's been great. Yeah. But this is new. I've never shared work with him before.
Okay. And the ways that you've corresponded, I guess earlier, were by mail. Are you still mostly doing? I mean, those are physical objects. Are they? You mostly send the manuscript to them, or email the manuscript and then they send you back
and they send me back
notes and all that, so you can have it
for
that. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be.
And I have over here in my file cabinet a file called Poems Feedback from Readers, and where I keep all the physical copies of all the poems that have come back from the people I've shown them to.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I use a lot in revising.
So I think we're pretty close. I guess, I kind of would like to ask kind of the blunt question, of this research, but I don't know, it's always all over the place. But what do you think, do you think anything fundamentally changed when you started to use computers more for your writing, or do you think those practices that you had before just were somehow metaphorically the same in a different kind of context?
I would say it's influenced the content of my poems more than the composition process.
Okay.
It's influenced the context. Computers and internet have influenced the content of my poems a lot.
Yeah.
Doing a lot with websites, with that kind of radical interconnectivity of associative thinking that the internet suggests.
Yeah.
And I think the dawn of the internet probably has changed the way I compose my poetics in a certain way, in that it's given permission for a more associative metonymic thinking process that I associate with internet links. I have a poem called Hyperlinks in Signs and Abominations that is a poem about thinking the way the internet thinks in a way, and that everything reminds you of something else. It takes you to another place, so that each line of the poem leaps from one idea to another that's only tangentially related to it.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain obsessive themes in that poem having to do with the birth of my son and adoption and purification and rituals of sort of preparing for fatherhood, but they're oblique and they're associative.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was one of the first poems where I consciously wrote a poem whose thinking was related to the way I think the internet thinks, if we can call the internet a thinker. In some ways it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but it hasn't really changed my composition process a whole lot, because I was doing on typewriters what I'm now doing on computers.
Yeah.
It's made it easier to cut and paste and move things around. But I often do that on note cards in writing anyway, rather than on the computer.
Yeah.
Because there's something about writing out the sections of a poem on a card and then moving them around that I find more satisfying even than doing it on the computer. So I'm using, especially in my newest poems, a lot of material that's based on the physicality of icons and things that are possible from a computer. Let me show you some other examples. Here's some more shapes that I'm using in that poem. There's an X and a Y and then an omega.
Yeah.
I'm using here reproductions of the Bruce Beasley sculptures.
Yeah.
Which of course would be possible without the internet, but I'm doing more visual collisions between text and image.
Yeah.
That is suggested by the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bruce. That was great. Let me turn these off.